Hey, this is Emmy Thomas. I have with me a panel of other psychopathically minded people. So it's me, it's Pretty Morbid, whom we've talked to before. It's Victoria, whom we've had before, and we have a new person, Juliet Tango. And since Juliet Tango has never answered this question before on one of these Zooms, we're going to ask Juliet Tango, what is it like to be you?
Hi. I actually still don't know how to answer that question. I can't give you a good answer. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Hopefully it will reveal itself as time goes on. I feel normal.
Yes, and so I forgot to kind of mention this to you too, Julia Tango, before we started recording. It's good for people to hear though that this is the caveat I give everybody. I won't ask you specific direct questions, and feel free not to share or not answer any sort of question that I ask in terms of like, yeah, whatever. So we had spoken earlier on the phone, and we had come up with a couple discussion points. Hopefully we'll get longer answers than the
Yeah.
first one. First discussion point is love. Let's talk about what is love to us on this psychopath panel.
Well, I can just say to begin that it's kind of new for me. So I feel like I'm kind of in your playground phase. And so it's overwhelming for me, but I definitely can feel like I have feelings. Um, but I just think I'm maybe like kind of like someone who is in high school or something. I'm not really like it's just different for me, I feel like, than it is for most people. So it's new, it's annoying.
What do you mean by it's new? It's annoying. Like how long
Well, I
what
mean, I
is
just
new?
don't
Like in
I
past couple
I don't
years?
yeah, I would say probably about a year or two. I don't really have like deep feelings like that or kind of infatuations that are or obsessions or whatever that are like I don't know, that are really deep like that. So it kind of surprised me. It's happened once before very uh like a long like 10 years ago. It seems like I have like a 10-year cycle maybe,
Mm.
and it lasts a couple of years and then it goes away and I'm back to my normal self.
What do you
When
mean it happened 10
go
year,
ahead,
10
sorry.
years ago? Like
Um,
how did it feel like? What do you mean by love?
well, I actually call it an attachment is how I usually will describe it because I feel like it's more of an attachment, like maybe an attachment you have to your grandmother or to your mother or your father or something like that. It's like a really strong attachment and kind of like a homesick feeling, something like that, and it makes me emotional. Like I usually I literally haven't cried for like 10 years, and then I've like cried so much, so it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just the way it is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Are are you like in a relationship with this
No,
person
no,
that
no. I'm not even in a
okay.
relationship yet. I don't know how that would even work with me.
Okay.
But I have had relationships in the past, but definitely like it's kind of like you've had it's kind of like having just a friend or a friend with benefits, and that's like kind of the most that it ever goes to. Like I just can't like go past that level because I'm not there emotionally mostly. So I'm still like enjoying time with them and going through all the motions, but I just don't like there's nothing there that like it's not the same as this is right now, I guess.
So, is it kind of fair to say like this attachment, since you're not it's not is it reciprocated?
No, I mean the problem is I'm a trucker and so is this other person. So it's really like even
Uh,
if we wanted to, we couldn't. But I mean, I don't think he wants to anyway, and he hasn't had relationships in a long, long time himself. And I just feel like it's a problem with me, and it presents a really good time for me to like evaluate what's going on in myself. Just having these emotions come up.
would you say that it's like a crush or like a
Um,
real true like love feeling?
I really feel this is the problem because see, I feel like it is an attachment. I don't like saying love. I do love them, but it's an attachment. It's what it really is, and it really, I mean, I can feel the same attachment to like my grandmother when I was little, and maybe this is
Mhm.
where kind of these things stem from. But I just feel like it's an attachment and that I normally don't have to other people. And so I just feel like a connection to that person. And also feel like it can be therapeutic and I can actually maybe help some of the, I guess, trauma I had as a child. Really wasn't that traumatic, but to me it was, you know,
Yeah.
compared to most people's trauma, it's not nothing. It's just nothing.
You know, it's interesting. Oh, Victoria, you go ahead.
No, my cat just
Press the mute. So it's interesting because I had like crushes, like I would say kind of like in the playground where it was just, you know, like an infatuation. Like I knew that I didn't even know that person. Like the person that I had a crush on, it was almost like a fabrication of like my brain or like my hormones or something. It reminds me a little bit of my favorite movie, Vertigo, where like obsession is a really big kind of topic in that movie, and you're never really sure whether the protagonist actually loves a person or just kind of like has like an infatuation with this kind of made up version of somebody who doesn't really exist. And it kind of seems like really questionable, and that's definitely how I would describe my crushes before, is like, you know, I'd get them totally randomly. They'd come almost like the flu.
Uh-huh.
Like weird inopportune times and on the weirdest people, you know, like I had a crush on a law school classmate of mine after we both graduated law school. And it's funny, during the crush, I kind of would like search back through my emails and be like, I don't even remember these emails with this person. Like we had so many emails about this or that, or, you know, like I actually worked with them on a project for quite some time and I had completely forgotten about it. And I'm like, why do I have this crush on this person now? It makes no sense. But I was truly single-minded about it at the time. I was like, ugh, I cannot stop thinking about this all the time. But then it's interesting, once I started going to therapy, probably about like 2 or 3 years in, I started having like these almost like what I imagined to be like girlhood, you know, like these super friendships that you see in like Mean Girls or whatever, or like I'm watching Yellow Jackets right now, the TV show, where it's not gay, but it's like a weird kind of like a consuming kind of friendship, like a kind of boundaryless friendship. And I had a couple of those too, but they were both one-sided, I think. They were also unrequited. And I was like, what is going on with my feelings? Like none of this makes sense. And it's funny because one of them I still talk to, and it's like totally like, you know, text or whatever, and like even try to avoid seeing them just because I'm kind of like, really any reason. Maybe just like it's not that interesting to me. That person's not interesting to me anymore. It's so weird going from like being like just totally like, I don't know, like heartsick is a
Yeah.
good word, is what it felt like about this person, to just being kind of like not feeling any connection to the person at all, and thinking, you know, even when I felt like I was heartsick, I probably was filling in a lot of blanks, and again was just kind of like seeing something that wasn't there, a little bit like the Vertigo protagonist.
that also reminds me of Villanelle when Anna killed herself in front of her and she said, oh, okay, like surprised.
Yes, yes, because she's been obsessed with this person for so long, and then, you know, it's like, okay, fine, sure.
Yeah.
But does that resonate with you, Victoria?
Well, when you first asked the question, I talk about love, I wasn't thinking about romantic love.
Mm.
I don't really distinguish between like types of love. It's just love, like family member love or friendship love, or yeah, towards my cats. So love, I think in the past I explained to someone that love is when I put their interest above mine.
Oh,
Yep.
that's a good way to put it. I would say usually for me, love has meant basically gratitude. Just really grateful that they're in my life to the extent they're in my life. Which
Yeah,
means like,
now it is for me appreciation based.
It is appreciation based.
Yep.
Well, I mean, sometimes I felt bad about the gratitude because I'm like, am I just appreciating the role that they play? You know, like, oh, this person, like even my girlfriend, like, oh, she makes me bacon, delicious. She tucks me in at night, like that, because she says I sleep like a rotisserie chicken in my bed, so I'm constantly like spinning, and then my sheets get all messed up. So she like every night goes in and fixes the sheets. Yeah.
Yeah, I think after delving into spirituality, love has a different meaning to me, uh, which I don't have the words for yet. So someone can go on, and when I have the words, I will come back to it.
All right. Sounds good.
I feel like I kind of relate to that, at least in terms of like having, I don't know, trying to develop a spiritual understanding of love. I've been thinking about love as like having components of one part like safety, but then another part like appreciation. And I don't know, I've related to a lot of what you said about like crushes when you were younger too, like you didn't have a sense of even knowing this person, or it was sort of just like yeah, I don't know, kind of comes from the void, which I actually resented a lot when I was younger because it felt like this weird like impulse or obsession that didn't have any connection to me that was just like derailing me from whatever I was actually interested in. But slowly over time, I've like started to have these flickers of like, I guess like deeper emotions in relation to love, but other feelings. And I guess for me, it feels like, I mean, I kind of get now why people talk about like emotions being watery because they like hit like I'm in water, like the way like you feel the weight of water when you're trying to walk in like the ocean or in like a lake or something. Like they're no longer just, well, they're kind of like shifting, but I guess my feelings before were either very like they feel like they either went like right to the core or they were sort of this like almost like amorphous, kind of very on the surface. Like I don't know, it's weird, like feeling your bones or feeling the wind. And now I feel more the sense of bodily kind of fullness to feelings. But that also is like I've just been kind of realizing more how many people seem to have this kind of general connection to everything and everyone that like seems to be like this safety net and this sense of like warmth and home and community. And it's like, I don't know, it's just like omnipresent for them. They're not like, I guess I've always felt like kind of very like I'm like a spirit like looking in. Um and yeah, I just feel like something about that is like very core to like love. Like it's this weird omnipresent interconnection that people have.
What do you mean? You said at the beginning, Pretty Morbid, that it like you kind of resented it because it came from the void, these like crush feelings. What do you mean by that?
I guess I just mean that it, I don't know, it sort of didn't seem connected to me and it didn't really seem to have any, it seemed to be like the feeling was intense, but it had no, I don't know, sensibility to it. The who the person was, how they behaved, how they looked, none of that added up. None of that was connected to the intensity of the feeling. The feeling was, I mean, it's kind of just like hearing thunder clap out of nowhere. Um, and yeah, that's also why I hated it so much. But because it just like, yeah, it was weird. And it
That's
was
funny.
short-lived too. Oh, sorry. What
Yeah.
were you gonna say?
No, well, I was just gonna say that it's funny to me that you hated it because I felt the same, you know, like it had like total, it was like without context. And because it had no context, it had no real meaning. You're like, this person doesn't even exist. Like these feelings are stupid. You know, they're like irrational, you know, even more than like most feelings are irrational. Uh and annoying, often annoying because you're like, yeah, exactly. You want to go on to the things that you want to do. But often I found like at least a little bit of pleasure because I thought at least I am connected to somebody somehow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm interested in this person, so I'm like cyber stalking them and it like just gave me something kind of to do, I guess, like just like if you were a super fan of like a celebrity or something, where it's like I don't know why I'm suddenly smitten by this person, but now I have like something that I enjoy doing, like every free moment or something, I'm kind of like, let's just, think about
Yeah, it
this
becomes like a
again.
passion or a hobby.
Yeah.
Do it. Yeah. It's interesting. I do find that like whenever I experience feelings like that, it it evokes like I don't know that there's like something about it just feels so like primal to me about it in the sense that like it is kind of disconnected from a higher sense of self or like goals or interests. And I don't know about for you, but for me, those feelings were like they could be exhilarating, which was enjoyable as much as it was frustrating. But I also always found it funny how whenever I was in those states, the kind of expression of like love or affection I had was like so like it's so like crushy. Like I need to like hug this person until I like crush them. And it's isn't this sense of like I want to hurt them. It's just like this surge that needs to just like be removed from my body. And it's like I don't know, so many people whenever I would see them have affection for like small animals or small children or other people, I could understand it to a degree, but it always made me laugh because I was like, man, if I expressed the energy I feel right now, it would just like kill that thing. Like, and it's not like it's so weird. It's like it's not a desire to hurt, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like a weird, like, if you burn your hand, like you just jolt away, like there's no control over it. It's just this like surge.
Is it something like cute aggression? Have you heard of that term?
Oh, no, I haven't. What's that?
Like something is so cute that you want to be aggressive towards?
Like you just
Ah,
want
it's
to
a,
squish it.
yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's what it would be.
Yeah, I feel that a little bit like with babies and stuff, like you want to consume them and that's not right. But Aria, my girlfriend was saying something today about how she used to feel like her therapist was like, remember when you used to, because we're going to Coachella, and she loves Frank Ocean. And so she's been telling her therapist, like making playlists for her therapist and stuff to like listen. And the therapist was like, remember when you used to talk about these things that you loved and you talked about wanting to consume them, like the attachment, the interest that you felt, the feelings that you had towards those things you liked a lot where it was like one of consumption. But I think what you said pretty morbid about kind of like it that level of kind of fixation, being primal and not really connected to you, it does feel really lizard brain. That
Yeah.
it doesn't have meaning, it's just kind of like like feeling, I don't know, like nauseated or something. Like nauseated has no meaning about your identity or your purpose or your even your interests. It's more like a physical feeling than anything else. But it kind of reminded me of, like when I was younger, this is getting like a little bit TMI. When I was younger, let's say like, real young or whatever, just like exploring my own body or something and like giving myself pleasure. And I kind of knew there was like an emptiness in it. There was like a primal kind of nature. And I would say that I took that into most of my relationships, even like physical kind of romantic relationships that I had with people. For many decades, it was like that. It was basically kind of like this, where you were having the feeling, but it was like more kind of a primal thing. There wasn't like meaning in it. There wasn't kind of a connection there. It was just kind of like, okay, that's nice or whatever. But there's always a detachment to it, kind of like, okay, this is pleasurable, but like pleasurable the same way that like just a massage can be pleasurable or like, really good ice cream can be pleasurable. You're not necessarily connecting with another person, nor is that thing necessarily connecting with like any part of you except for like your body. You know, you're just like very superficial level physical sensations that you're having. But I do think that, you know, like after the therapy, kind of like through the therapy, like I started connecting to things. And I even started, this is all, again, too much information. Like, if you kind of think of like, I mean, this was not as much my experience, but you think of like the typical kind of movie, TV show character or something who's just like watching porn and then just like needs to get off or whatever. They're just watching whatever porn that's going to make it easiest for them to climax, right? Like I just watched White Lotus season 2, and this is one of the characters, you know, they're just kind of like, okay, you know, just need to climax, satisfy this physical need. Now, like if I like sit down to pleasure myself, like it's never even about that. Like I always am very careful to kind of like just resonate with something, like really, really like vibe hard on something. And I try not to involve any other people because I don't want it to be like a kind of vertigo type situation where I'm just like imagining kind of a thing, because that feels really objectifying to me. And I just don't like that as much. I don't want to kind of like have it be like just a physical sensation. I want it to be like a form of self-expression to me. So like to give you an example, this was like before the winter happened. Now I'm like, it's been a long California winter. If you guys have seen in the news, it's been like rainy and like very cold for like much longer than it normally is. But like in the summer, like at the peak of the summer, last like August or September, I was in my bed. I was like looking into my closet, and I saw like in my closet kind of packed away like a pair of sweatpants. And I had like this like memory of what it was like to wear the sweatpants and want to be in sweatpants, you know, like because it was so hot that day. I was like, and it had been so hot for many weeks. And so I was just kind of vibing on the idea of like cold and sweatpants. And that was like the thing, like my experience in the sweatpants was was what I was like thinking about like during this particular experience. I just feel like it's so different though, like from what I used to feel, which was like, you know, I won't name people about this, but I've like talked to other psychopaths who, you know, will look at snuff films and stuff to kind of like be stimulated this particular way. And it seems like that is like that's just, I
Wait,
can
is
see
this a
why they
sexual
do it.
thing? Is it a sexual thing, or is it just a morbid curiosity? Because I definitely watch those as not just those, but also gory things. But it's not
Yeah.
sexual. It's just curiosity, and I feel rather unshocked. But it's still fun to see because you don't get to see that, and death is kind of hidden from our culture.
Yeah. I like this topic of snuff films for them, and then I want to hear more about you, Juliet Tango. For them, I think it is like a sexual thing. It's mostly like they want to be hyper stimulated, and I think is what's happening. And then that hyper stimulation like requires a release or something. And so the like the best release is like a sexual release for them. And so that's kind of like the cocktail, the particular cocktail that they're into. But I think what they're trying to do though is like, you know, make it a cocktail. You know, they're no longer satisfied with just drinking like vodka or whatever. You know, it has to be mixed with something else, or that on top of, you know, like also, you know, weed, or, you know, like multiple kind of things in order, because there's like a shallowness to their sexual experience that they're trying to enhance kind of through these like other things that still don't have meaning for them, but still have like crazy implications, you know, the same way that something that would be meaningful to you might have like deeper implications.
I definitely
It's,
relate to that in the sense of like I don't know, I used to have like a huge fixation on like any intense or dark or violent subject matter videos and stuff, and I used to find like an experience of it that was like really intoxicating, like it just drew me in, but also like yeah, that hyper stimulation. I've like I've stopped watching pornography kind of altogether for like I don't know, probably several months now, and almost stopped masturbating too, but, like, at the end, the hyperstimulation aspect of it was, like, I would literally have, like, 8 videos playing at once and just, like, had the volume cranked up on everything, and it it made me laugh so much thinking about it, like, "This is insanity." but it was like this ADHD, like going from one tab to another, just need to overwhelm myself with as much stimulus as possible. And yeah, but there was all it's kind of odd. I mean, that's kind of also why I stopped is like it's weird. It's like I'm trying to chase. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the way people talk about drugs. Like I'm trying to
Yeah.
chase this intensity I got once that like I just never can get back to. And eventually I've like amped up so many different things that it just yeah, it doesn't get anything close. And now since like the past several months that I've like been trying to like engage with my sexuality in a different way, in like a deeper way. You know, I've avoided stimulus, so like don't even imagine anything, don't watch anything, just like focus on physical feeling. I find that like the old form of like arousal is just so exhausting and like kind of obnoxious because it is that like, well, I just got a climax. Like it's this efficiency thing. It doesn't have any meaning. And yeah, I definitely relate though to slowly starting to I don't know, yeah, just be present to it. Like the pleasure and joy of it is like different. It has more depth, and it like slowly is building.
Victoria?
I thought of what would best describe love now for me.
Nice, good.
It is unconditional acceptance and 100% presence. Like when it's not even just towards people, it's maybe towards something I'm doing or a particular moment where I just accept people or things or events as they are, and I am 100% present. That's love.
I love it. I'm trying to think how often I'm 100% accepting, 100% present with people, things. You know, like so I have a baby blankie and a teddy bear that I sleep with. And when my girlfriend like tucks me in at night, uh he makes sure that I have them with me, you know, that I know where they are. They're like in my arms or something. And one time she came in and she's like, "Oh, where are your friends? Like, where are they?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, can you help me find them?" But that's what she would ask. But this time when she said, where are your friends?" I got like offended and I was like, "They're not my friends. They're my family." She's like, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry." Where's your family or something? And then the next night I think she said like, "Where's your family?" And I was like, again, like when I'm like I take sleep meds so I get a little loopy. It's a good way to put this. So when she said the family, I was like kind of like offended. I was like, that's not quite what they are either. So I said they're my loves. So now when she asks like, where are they? She's always like, where are your friends, family, loves? But I think it's kind of like a good way to kind of put it though, friends, family, loves or something. Like there's like for me, yeah, I have like such a fondness for them, but it is really like difficult to describe, but it's like I need to think more about this. Like why do I love them so much? Because they're just like strips of like fabric that I am like so so invested in, you know, like how did this happen?
Is it because it's something that link you
Mm.
towards all phases of your life?
Yes, I think so. That as soon as you said that, as soon as you started, is it because it's something that links? I was like, I think that is the thing. I think like the reason why I love them so much is because they have been with me like through all phases, and I feel like an a special fondness and connection to like my little child self, which I never used to feel. But now maybe it's like the distance or something. I just think, you know, this like beautiful little girl or whatever that was who I used to be is like such a sweet thought to me. Like I have like such love for her and just like always want the best for her even though I know she didn't always get the best. Especially I guess because I know she didn't always get the best. It's good. My meditation teacher is always talking about self-love. It's such a good practice. Like I think people are reluctant to do it because here's why I think people are reluctant to do it. He always has like, like a couple minutes of caveats at the beginning. So I know he must be talking to some audience out there that's reluctant to do it, where he's like, I know this feels ridiculous. I know you're not going to want to do this. And it's just going to feel so cheesy and stupid. And, like he keeps going on, but he's like, but just give it a try or something. Um, it is kind of funny because I would have never thought that that was like something that would ever be important to me is to have like fond feelings towards my younger self. But it feels so nice. So nice now to like just acknowledge it and to be able to experience it, to just be like, yes, I really do have fond feelings towards my younger self. But again, what are those fond feelings? It answers that why I like the scraps of fabric. But like, what does love mean to me? Well, I'm gonna have to keep thinking about this before I get on to Juliet Tango and snuff films. Does anybody have another thing to say about what we said? Pretty morbid. I'm so proud of you. This trying to drill down, I guess is what it is, trying to drill down into your sexuality, your sexual identity.
I do have a question. Do you think you're more present with life when you're younger?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So you kind of have mentioned this too. I think think I told the story originally when I was talking to you, Victoria, about my niece in the
Yes.
kiddie pool.
Yes.
Yeah. So just in case people haven't like seen that, and it's funny because I put that in the like forward or the introduction, I guess, to like book 2. Like I'm trying to like still work on the book proposal and stuff. So I read it often, as I'm kind of like reading through it and stuff. I read the story often, and it still always makes me cry to like read this story. But so my niece was like, she was only like 2 years old at the time, and my whole family was camping at the beach, and it's my extended family, so it's my cousins and all of their kids. And so there's like a ton of little babies, around all the time, and like bigger kids and stuff. There's just like a wide range of different ages that are there, but she was one of the youngest. I think she was like youngest or tied for youngest, kind of. But they had got it in their head to do this project where they were going to dig a sand pit and then fill it up with water. But like sand drains really fast in a sand or water drains really fast in a sand pit at the beach. So they had to keep like filling it up with water. They're trying to make like a pool, I guess, sand pool. So they're doing that for kind of like 20 minutes. But since she's one of the smaller one, like the big kids had the buckets, so she only had like this little green cup that was like maybe 6 ounces, like half the size of like a Coke can. And she was like, doing it with them. And a lot of them were going to the ocean. She was going to the kiddie pool, be like stealing the water from the kiddie pool and like dropping it off at the sand pit. And she was like totally into the project. And in fact, she was so into it that like even once the big kids had kind of like moved on to like a slightly different project, she kept doing it. She kept doing it for like an hour. And it was like the last day of the beach, and I'm just sitting there, like sun baked brain or whatever, just basically staring at her, like not doing anything. I must have been like tired, super tired too. But I thought, why does she keep doing this? She's like almost obsessively going back and forth, and like her little cup is making zero difference to the sand pit. Like it's not doing anything to the sand pit. It's basically like like what? Like wasted effort or something. So I was thinking of this about her, almost kind of like feeling a little bit badly for her that she was wasting her time trying to fill up the sand pit with water. But then I had like an epiphany that like struck me like, and it wasn't then that I had the epiphany. I think it was kind of like a little bit later. But when I had it, I was just like mowed over by the strength of the epiphany. I thought, why am I so obsessed with the difference she's making to the level of the sand pit? Like, why is that my kind of criteria for determining whether or not this is like an okay activity to, like something that's wasting your time or not? Like, why wasn't I instead thinking about the difference it made to her? She obviously was like way in flow. She was enjoying herself. She was like being herself in that moment, just exactly doing the thing that she wanted to do, being the person that she was. Like she was like entirely sincere and authentic in that moment, just doing her heart's desire without any kind of concern for like what anybody else was doing. She really was like living her best life. Those were her choices were coming from a deep place of self-expression. She wasn't being influenced by other people. And so I started to kind of admire her, and just little children in general for this because, like I have traditionally struggled with just being myself. And I thought, wow, children are so good at this. Children are so good about just being themselves. Yeah, sure, they're influenced by certain things and influenced by each other, but they're often, like way more than we are, way more than adults are. They're choosing just from a place of deep inner preference and self expression instead of like choosing to try to impress people or choosing to try to, get out of things or choosing for all the reasons that we do to conform, the status quo, or, kind of like trading things. I'll do this to get this other thing later or something. So I do think that, I really admire children for this ability to just be themselves in the moment and to kind of just live their life's
Yeah.
purpose very much in the moment.
Yeah, and also unconditional acceptance about everything that come their way.
That's true too, huh? For the
And
most
that's
part. I mean,
love.
sometimes they like cry about ice cream dropping or something.
Yeah, and they fully accept that they are sad. They don't try to not feel the sadness or feel shame or want to get over it. They're just fully in that moment, even when they're not experiencing joy.
Yeah, they know better than to try to kind of like mask or whatever. They're just like, if they're struggling with their feelings, they're struggling with their feelings. But I don't think it's usually, especially very young children, it's not to try to like give other people a different impression. They're not masking, they're not trying to be, give just a different, different impression. Give other people like a different view than what's actually happening inside them, kind of pretending. They don't feel like they have to pretend. Like their pretend play are always just fun, imaginations. They're not like
Yeah,
that's
I
interesting.
think that's the fondness that you might have for when
For
you're younger.
for my bear and Blanky now.
Yeah.
I bet I was more, and it really was a struggle. I felt so sad not being able to be myself for like all those decades. Like really just like every once in a while I'd tap into myself and there'd be self-expression, I'm sure. But it was like accidental. It was just kind of like happenstance, right place, right time type thing. Like just turning on the TV or something and then having it be your favorite movie.
I've been doing a lot of meditating recently where I've had like I don't know, I feel like I've been feeling my like brain get rewired,
Mm.
and I've been getting to like trying to dig to like these core feelings of like where my blocks come up from. And one of them that I felt strongly that's come up, I guess maybe in the past couple months, is kind of this like I know there's a lot of deep sadness around it, but there's also a lot of rage around this sense of like I always could have processed my emotions. Like it's this sense of like whenever I was a kid, I could have processed my emotions. No one would let me go through it. Like I needed to just go through the sadness or the anger, but so many people had so much anxiety and shame and guilt around me being upset that they had to control the situation. And in doing so, they kind of just downloaded all of those stressors onto me more, so rather than just me being upset because I dropped my ice cream and then needing to have a fit about that and then move on, everyone kind of gotten in the way. And yeah, it evoked like, I think it like triggered deep kind of instinctual repression, but also this sort of what I've been getting towards recently is like a deep sense of like violation. Like I just needed space to have intense feelings, and it doesn't mean the world's about to end. Um, but I do think it's getting better, but I do think our culture in particular, I guess American culture, I don't know, emotional repression is like a huge huge like underlying current that has like existed for a long time. And yeah, I guess recently, just in like my meditation over the past few months, I started to feel this like energy in my head, and I've literally felt it move to like at first it like moved to like where like the amygdala is, like in the center of the head, but now it's like moving to like the reptilian brain. Like I'm starting to feel it, and I'm starting to have these like memories come up from childhood that like I forgot about. Like I forgot about how much attachment I had to certain things, to uh stuffed animals or like fictional characters, how much of a sense of like being hurt or not being heard um there was, and like how much, yeah, I've recently had like a sense of like violation come up where I don't know, I used to be so confused by why people would be so bothered by anything really, because if things bothered me, I guess it was sort of like it bothers you, you take action, it's done. Or you just, if there's no action to take, then who gives a shit, move on. And I didn't understand why people would get so caught up in it. But now I've started to like reconnect with like these really intense feelings of violation where like I was in a deep sense of flow at a very young age, and someone just like fucking put a brick wall right up in front of that. And that like fracture is kind of what really sent me off on this course where I became so of the void. It's just a phrase. I say the void a lot, but that phrase, that word just means a lot to me.
What do you mean it set you on a path that you're now of the void? What does that mean?
I guess like I don't know, in some ways it kind of reminds me of that notion of consuming. Like the void is this weird like there's this weird emptiness to it, but there's also this sense of like devouring. And I guess of the void, like it's like I don't know, it's that losing all sentiment. There isn't meaning behind things, there isn't a connection between things. um People's feelings and attachments, relationships, the way, I don't know, their habits, like even now I feel like I have a hard time describing it because I feel like a normal description would like evoke some emotional trail that people would engage with, and I like tend to like live in like either hyper literal or hyper abstract. But I guess I have this sense of like there's this like survivor kill switch in me, and my connection, my sense of like of the void is like if I'm not able to ground, I guess here's another way I kind of would put it. Recently in like meditating, I've been thinking a lot about presence and like focusing on my body and like where is my energy, and having this sense of like for so long I just kind of had this desire to be like a spirit, like to be a mythical creature in a way. Like I took thrill in kind of just being able to bounce into people's lives, create like a really strong impression, and then just poof, gone. And there's now this sense that like I never got to ground. Whenever I was a little kid, I was trying to ground. There were intense feelings and emotions, and I was like able to I had this deep intuition that like I was strong enough to handle it. I needed to embody it. I needed to feel it. I needed to bring it in. I needed to like ground in this world and my sensations and my understanding. And when that natural process was inhibited and interrupted, it just created this fracture where I had to become a very detached version of myself in order to survive.
Yeah. Right. I can, as you're saying this, I feel like I'm having like similar memories, of just like trucking along, as a little child. And then like, like as you kind of say, just like a brick wall that you almost like walk into it and you're like, I didn't even realize, that other people were around kind of thing. But not only are they around, but they want to like stop whatever I'm doing, and micromanage how I feel or whatever the thing is. But it is true. It's like a violation. It's a total violation of like your personhood, your autonomy, your your ability to just kind of have your own internal world without undue influence from others.
Yeah, and one that I've had recently that I've been experiencing is having this memory of like realizing being kind of in that flow state at a very early age, and then having like a really intense realization that somebody wants to hurt me, and that is like their goal, their intention, and like the disturbance of that being so intense, like it felt like it like broke me. And it, because it just like so heavily inhibited that like that flow, that safety, whatever it is. It's like that you thought like, I don't know, it's kind of like what you said where like you thought you were alone and then you realize you weren't. And then you realize you weren't just alone, but you were being like watched, you were being like hunted. And it's just like I do feel like now I'm in this place where like I am healing from all of that, which is like really empowering and strengthening. Um, but in order to do that, I also have to like return to acknowledging how like devastating it actually was.
Victoria?
Juliet Tango can go on. He's muted.
Okay. It is pretty crazy though. Yeah, thank you, Pretty Morbid, for sharing those things, because like I feel like this is basically the second book, and then we'll get to Juliet Tango's snuff films.
Oh
But
my God.
this is the second book, is like, look, this is how damaging it is to violate people's like personhood, their autonomy, their identity. Like this is like what ends up happening when you do it. And so like there's like a full chapter, kind of two chapters, about boundaries and like how to like let people live their own life, and about how to let people have their own self-concept without you're interfering with them. But it's kind of crazy how uh kind of not common wisdom, or like not even common belief that is, like I've mentioned her like many times, but one of my favorite follows on Instagram is Nedra Tawwab, who has the book Find Boundaries, Find Peace. And she's always saying things that I'm just like, I'm so glad she's saying these things, because everybody just kind of thinks, like, oh, the ends justify the means, and they're willing to like enact like actual physical violence, much less like psychological violence. They don't feel any qualms about that, like just totally attacking people online, or trying to ruin their lives, or whatever, for just kind of a different set of beliefs. And people say all the time, that's a very dangerous belief, or whatever. What's kind of dangerous to me in my mind is like the different ways that people uh hurt each other in a way that's is going to leave such long lasting damage. And some of these people will never come out of it. Some of these people that you hurt will never be able to recover from the things that you've done to them. And I have like a really hard time, the same what reason why I'm opposed to the death penalty. I just have a really hard time thinking that we should be hurting each other willfully in order to, like, because we see them as an enemy or something, or because we see them as a threat, and so we're just going to do these terrible things to each other. I think though, especially for these psychological harms, that it's not understood as much as it should be, how damaging that can be, to children, to kind of treat them this way. um so thank you, Pretty Morbid, for that. Juliet Tango, you want to talk about your snuff films?
Well, actually, first, before we leave this topic, I kind of wanted to say there's some things I thought about in the past. I think I've shared with you before. I feel like meditating is easy for me, and I feel like maybe it's a psychopathic trait, but I'm not sure. But like for me, I find it really easy to go to meditation, or like just to um kind of have a meditative state of mind, or just be present. I don't know if that's common for everyone, because everyone seems to struggle with it, and sometimes I do too, but I feel like maybe I have an easier time for some reason. I don't know if that's a psychopathic thing or just a me thing.
Tell us what you mean by easier time.
Well, I just feel like it's easy for my mind to go blank and for me not to be troubled by things. I don't know if that's if that's just a me thing. It could be just me. I mean,
So,
you have
uh,
trouble sleeping. I usually go to sleep in like 2 seconds. So I don't know. My mind can just go blank.
yeah. I often say this about melatonin that people who don't like melatonin just have psychological demons because the melatonin, there's something about it that kind of like, you have more vivid dreams. And so if your dreams are kind of bad, then they get more vividly bad. But if they're kind of like, my dreams are always like just very checklisty, taking care of business type dreams, little projects I have going on in my dreams. And so it just kind of ramps up that or whatever. Here and there, like I guess a little bit of anxiety about like not having the right clothes for a music performance or not having the music or something. But I kind of relate to this, Juliet Tango. And especially, I think like my girlfriend Aria would say things like, would agree with Pretty Morbid about this, that there was like a big span of her life in which she was just like, why is everybody upset? There's no reason to be upset. And, we can just kind of keep trucking along about things. And well, I guess she had nightmares, but she wouldn't say that she had nightmares. That's the thing. And I guess I remember this too, like, well, especially kind of like a little bit famously in the book said like, I did not grow up in an abusive household, even though I did, but it's just kind of like, and she was telling me this again, she was talking about her therapist today. She's like, when I first saw him, I was like, I don't even have like, an abusive childhood, or I don't even have that many traumas in my childhood, or no traumas at all. Then you just kind of start to realize maybe that there are things. Not saying that this is going to happen to you, Juliet Tango, but I would bet you a Chick-fil-A meal.
Oh, I'm vegetarian.
I think I once told this to Pretty Morbid. Does that sound right, Pretty Morbid? Did I say predict this future for you?
Um, I'm not sure if you did. I feel like I've definitely heard it from you before, though.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't happen to you, Juliet Tango. And it doesn't happen to everybody. I think it kind of really does depend like your childhood and kind of how things happened and like what happened afterwards and different things you did. Like Aria likes to say like the harder you played in the playground, the worse your reckoning is. And maybe that's true, but I also think that it's just there are multiple things kind of going on. And once you peel off one layer, once you kind of like, I don't know, firm up your sense of self, maybe you find that you do have like underlying anxiety issues, or you do have underlying blood sugar issues, or you do have underlying other things that have kind of been, like pushed to is it the foreground? Foreground is the one in front, to the background, pushed to the background that are suddenly being brought to the foreground. But why do you do meditation then, Juliet Tango?
Um, well, I have my former dentist. I used to house sit for her, and she invited me to her Zen Buddhism circle or whatever. So I ended up going, and I actually found that I think what I experienced is kind of like a false awakening or something. I don't know. I just felt very peaceful and tranquil, and like it wasn't difficult for me to do all the time. I just feel like a lot of people have trouble focusing, or they have trouble um, being present, I guess. And I just found it like, wow, this is really interesting being in a room with everyone that kind of is doing the same thing or has the same intention. And I don't know, I just kind of like the feeling. And so I ended up doing it once a week for a couple of years. And I don't always meditate now, but I feel like it's really easy for me just to go on a walk or something or to be cooking and to just kind of be present and enjoy it. So I don't know. I mean, Buddhism is interesting in general, and meditation is interesting, but I don't know. I just always felt like it's always kind of easy for me to slip into being mindful. Um, Also, I have times when my mind races, but generally it's kind of just observing without talking. But I don't,
Yeah.
the reckoning, I do kind of feel like I'm entering a reckoning with just my emotional reckoning, I suppose, like just like from all the things I haven't felt or like past trauma. When I was very young, I was separated from my grandparents who were my primary caregivers. So I feel like that kind of had an impact on me. But I mean, that's really the only trauma that sticks out in my mind. I don't think I treated people unfairly or, didn't do anything that they didn't deserve.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say about mindfulness. Like I did not find it easy. The only kind of time that I would feel that sense, I guess, was like playing music and swimming, which I think were the reasons why I like intuition, even when I didn't
You
call it
like them.
intuition. Yeah, it kept pushing me towards those activities, like these are good for you.
Yeah, I mean it's a different feeling when you do it in a group full of people too. I feel like it is different, or even easier. Um, and I read the well, I didn't read it. I listened to the book Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth or whatever his first book was. I don't know if you've heard of that or read it, but I was painting my walls and I ended up listening to it. And he talked a lot about mindfulness, and I was like, wow, this is like I've always felt this, but didn't know that that's hard for other people to achieve, or like to kind of like get into that zone, or even realize you have a voice in your head that's not really you, but it's just talking. It's not you don't have to believe everything it says. It's not really you. You don't have to identify with those thoughts. And I thought maybe just because of what you've talked about, not identifying or not really having identity, I feel like I mean, I do have preferences, and I feel like I do kind of have an identity, but it's just very um, loose. It's it can be anything really. But I mean,
Hmm.
when I'm in that, I do identify with it. I mean, I identify. I mean, my preferences, for instance, like I definitely have things I like and things I don't like, and they're really me. But I don't really have like a super firm identity, like with male, female, sexual orientation. Like I kind of am just me, and I don't really have to think about it too much. I don't really care about. So that part that you've described before about people being bisexual, I'm bisexual. I feel like um, I don't even think about gender. Like it's just not a thing to me. Like I don't really care what other people how they present themselves or whatever, but I just don't really even think about being male or being female. I just kind of am me,
Yeah. What
if that
about,
makes sense.
do you have feelings about your nationality?
Well, I mean, my mom's side of the family is Hispanic and my father's side is German, and so I get to experience both of their kind of cultures, but I don't really have like a strong cultural identity either. In fact, a lot of people think I'm Jewish, and so I always say I can get away with telling Jew jokes, but no, I don't really feel like I have a strong identity with that either.
Yeah. What about with your profession?
Absolutely do not.
With
No.
the region of the country that you grew up in?
Oh, that I would say the Pacific Northwest to me is special. It's really special. But I could live anywhere. Oh, I could live in many places. And with occupations, I mean, when I first start them, sometimes I feel like a fraud. Like when
Mm.
I'm saying we, it's like I just started working here. What am I saying we for? Like, I don't know, it just sounds, it kind of feels weird at first. I feel like a fraud, but I think everyone does when they're starting something new. But I definitely do not feel like a trucker. I don't identify as a trucker. But that's what I do. And I worked in hotels. I mean, it's not really my identity. It's just what I do. And I guess my identity is just like the things I like. I mean, maybe that's what I consider my identity is my preferences, the things I like, my aesthetic, whatever. Those are the things I would kind of tie into my identity a little.
Hmm.
But I don't really have like a set, a firm identity, I guess.
Yeah. What about, do you have like sports teams or something? Do you feel like, do you ever feel comfortable saying we?
Uh, I mean, I suppose if I was actually for sure that I was representing other people well, but I mean, I just don't. I just feel like I'm more independent, and I don't have any sports teams. I mean, there's brands I like. I mean, I don't know if that's the kind of identity you're referring to, but it's not like I'm really attached to them that strongly. It's just kind of like this is what I like, and I'd prefer this, but if it's not, that's fine. Like I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have a strong identity. I haven't found my identity, I suppose, or if I have, it's just yeah, it's something I need to work on, I suppose.
Well, do you feel like any discomfort or something from not having a stronger sense of identity?
I don't. In fact, I feel like it's quite beneficial.
Yeah, tell us
So,
how it's beneficial. I love to hear this.
well, it's just not. It's easier to be, or well, it's harder to be disturbed by anything because, I mean, I suppose politically I'm more libertarian, which again is kind of it's
So
kind
am
of
I.
a Morpheus. Yeah. So I mean, I just kind of feel like I don't really I have a hard time pinning down what is me. But I mean, it's harder to upset me, I suppose, because I don't really care. Like if, someone's getting all riled up politically, or sometimes I do more politically, maybe something that I think are just really dumb, but it's not really because I identify with it. I just think it's stupid. But I guess that would be some identity there that's getting upset. But I don't know. I just feel like it's harder to disturb me if, because I don't really have a strong identity. So if you don't like something, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't really personally affect me because I don't really hold on to that thought that strongly.
Are there like any things that can like disturb you kind of in that identity way?
Um, I think we talked about this briefly with the white rage or the gray rage or whatever you call it. Like
Yeah.
there is some kind of a thing like that that upsets me. When someone finds my boundaries that I don't really know where they are myself, and so when someone does come upon them and I find them, like it really is upsetting to me. So I don't know, but that's I don't know. I don't know if that's really answering your question, but that's the only kind of really thing I find that upsets me. It's more, I think about like space or like someone new like taking advantage of me or that kind of thing. Like I don't know, it just kind of feels like that.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that upset me.
Do you feel comfortable giving an example if you can think of one?
Well, I had a roommate once who I think I mentioned this to you. He was a
Yeah.
Chinese roommate, and he's just very different. He does things very differently. Uh, I cook a lot in the kitchen. I use onions and garlic, and he was really offended by the smells of onions and garlic, which is hard to believe. But um, just his little customs and things he did kind of pissed me off right off the bat, I guess. But um, I don't know what it was specifically about him. Just he's also a very set person, has like a very set schedule, and I'm not. I've never had like a bedtime or I don't know. I always felt like I was bothering him, kind of, but it was weird because it was my apartment, and so it was kind of weird that I felt like I was bothering him. So that kind of, I guess, was some resentment formed. And then I told you the example of how he would always cook this same meal each week. He'd make a pot of soup on the stove, kind of with whatever vegetables were on sale, and then chicken, and he would leave it sit on the stove for the entire week. He just boil it in the morning and boil it at night before he ate it, and then make noodles and put it together. But anyway, it was just so foul smelling by the end of the week. I cleared a spot in the fridge for him. Like, I was trying to get him to put it in the fridge instead of just putting it on the stove in my way. And those kind of things, like I guess like little things like that. Once I had a roommate who redecorated the kitchen, which is full of my things. I guess the kitchen is like a really contentious place for me. But that's I guess my little territory. I guess I get bothered when people disturb it. But
Yeah.
it's not really that I identify with it. It's just it bothers me that they're disturbing me. Um, but like hiding my things. I don't know I don't know where any of the things are. They're all in different drawers and that kind of stuff. I guess people touching my things when I didn't offer it, maybe, or I don't know. Something along those lines bothers me, but it's not really identity.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you said though. I whatever identity is, often think of identity as being like your agency, autonomy, personhood, kind of like those three things. Because a lot of people ask, hey, what is identity? Identity changes and stuff. And sure,
Yeah.
it changes, but you have personhood, that's pretty stable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you said something about, you're kind of like not aware of your boundaries until somebody bumps up against them. And then you
Yeah.
realize that you're triggered because they've violated a boundary or an expectation of yours.
And kind of going with what Pretty Morbid says about your energy, like it doesn't help to be a part of all these groups or to get triggered by everything because your energy does go there. Like, you're spending your time, you're wasting yourself on things that aren't even you, I feel like. So that I've
Yeah.
never had a really trouble like staying in my own self, I don't think, or like just not getting tied up with identity. I don't know, but I think that's a positive thing, not really. I don't know. I think I kind of view it myself personally as a positive thing for me.
Yeah. So there's this essayist is probably a good way to describe him. Paul Graham. They call him, I think, like his Wikipedia page calls him like a hacker philosopher. Now, I don't like him for like all things. Yeah, I follow him on Twitter, but he has an essay from like 2009 or something called "Keep Your Identity Small," and he basically makes that argument, Juliet Tango, that like the more things you identify with, the more things that are going to trigger you. You know, it's
Yeah.
like basically by identifying with something, you're just making yourself more vulnerable to being triggered. What my therapist would call identity hits. You know, somebody's attacked some part of your identity or something that you take personally. So he kind of suggests, you know, like if you you know have political beliefs, sure, but like don't make them part of your identity. You know, that
Yeah.
way you're not going to be triggered if somebody disagrees with you or et cetera, et cetera. So he talks about that. I mentioned it like a little bit too, like in this second book about you know, I went down kind of a rabbit hole, but there are like 30 to 50 like murders, intentional murders from road rage every year in the United States. And I just think who's getting triggered this badly that they are murdering each other about this. But there have been like thousands of people dead because of football hooliganism, soccer hooliganism.
Yeah.
So like probably the most recent one of these was, I always forget the other team. I think it's Atlas and another team in Mexico where like I watched the videos, they were so disturbing. They were just like beating people to death, like naked. First they strip off their clothes and then just kicking them in the head, and they're like sitting there in a pool of blood, and the official death toll is 0, but there are so many videos that you know it's got to be like dozens, and it's like even more disturbing to me that their official death toll was 0 because they're just like not even willing to kind of admit that this happens. That's the thing
Yeah.
that bothers me about normal people is like they get so caught up in these things, like these like whirlwind of emotions or something, and they're so identified with these things that they kind of like get crazed about it, and then they do like these awful things like the one, it's psychopaths have their own problems, but a psychopath wouldn't do that because they're not caught up in their emotions usually, and they're not usually identity triggered except for this one exception, the gray rage. Yeah, but have you felt so you felt the gray rage about the Chinese roommate?
Yeah. And also when I came back from a vacation and my other roommate had redone the kitchen, like
Oh yeah.
thinking that she had done me a favor, and it was just such a slap in the face. Like I can't find anything. Everything in the kitchen is mine. Like why would you do that?
Hmm.
Like why would you go and rearrange my things that I let you use? Like I don't understand. Like it just was such so pissed me off.
Yeah,
I was like
so
shaking.
that you were shaking. So in
Yeah.
therapy, I used to always be kind of glad when stuff like that would happen, like during therapy, because I was like, if I am triggered by this, there has to be like part of me in this, you know? So I'd be like, this is basically like, you know, like like a metal detector. You're like, sometimes I help my friend who's a surveyor, and we're always looking for property corners that are
Yeah.
usually like a metal, yeah, a little metal thing in the ground. So you're trying to like metal detector, and then it's like a positive reading, like, oh, you know, like there is metal here. You know that
You
this
found it.
possibly is a property corner. Yeah. So I always feel that way. You know, like in when I was trying to kind of better delineate my sense of self, my sense of who I am. I was like, oh, this is like a good indicator that there might be something here. If I kind of drill down, there might be like some more information about who I am, because I'm clearly getting triggered by this. And why am I getting triggered?
Yeah,
Victoria?
Yeah.
I'm going to push back a bit that you say this is maybe a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I would rephrase it and say this has something to do with my programmed subconscious, not necessarily who you are. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah. And when you're talking about not identifying with, yeah, not taking up too many identities and getting triggered, I think with like spiritual teaching, it's even one step further where you don't have any preference, then nothing is gonna trigger you. Like
Yeah.
you don't have preference that your things will be where they are, where you put them, then it's not gonna trigger you. And if you don't have preference in life, about anything, nothing is gonna trigger you. Like even when what people say things don't go your way, because you don't have a preferred way, everything is like a new adventure, and you will appreciate life a lot more.
Well,
I feel like
go
I feel
ahead.
like it's the fact that I just so thoughtfully place things in the most efficient and practical place, and that they're all mine, and then to have someone come in and put them where I can't even find them. It's just so angering. I don't know. It just really was.
I
I don't
know,
know what it
I
was.
can relate. I also have an aesthetic for efficiency, as how ME would put that. Yeah, an aesthetic for efficiency. But sometimes I take a step back and think like, why is inefficiency bothering so much? Is it worth being so triggered by
Yeah.
people doing things inefficiently? Like, is there beauty in chaos that I can learn to appreciate and not be triggered?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it
But
it is kind of silly because afterwards I did kind of feel stupid, like, wow, I can't believe this upset me that much. I haven't ever been this upset. You know, it just seemed really dumb. But I still was really upset.
yeah. So I will like, I don't know, not it's not really a rebuttal. I guess it's more like we're tacking like a sailboat. But I would say like, yeah, I wouldn't you're right. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a part of your identity, but even if it's a program part of your subconscious, that's still part of you and you may not be aware of it. And so I guess when I'm kind of saying like strengthen your sense of self, like another good kind of synonym phrase for it would be to try to bring more things into your awareness about about your beliefs, your preferences, your the way things the way you react to things, just to understand yourself a little bit more, like, and just kind of be more aware of these things. That I would say, is part of identity. Like, I guess I use the word identity differently than most people
Yeah.
because that's just you, right? So I'm like that. Okay, you is kind of identity. Whatever you would say is you. I'm saying is identity. I'm not necessarily saying, like, I don't know, like, what do most people say is identity? Like musically talented, or some of these other things that people might say are identity's like, the fact that you like snore or something, like that's part of you, even though it's like a temporary thing. It's possibly even a physical thing, but it's you right now, I guess. Is still kind of. And I think that there's like a lot of somatic experiences that, when I was a baby psychopath, just was not aware of. I was just like ignoring so much of like the messages that my body, my mind, my emotions were trying to kind of send to me about, what was my state, what was my current state in that moment. And I'll call that identity too, and I was just ignoring all these kind of messages coming to me. And I totally get this idea. And it's interesting, Eastern philosophy, it's so true, and Paul Graham, both kind of getting at the same thing, which is if you don't have a preference about something, you're not triggered. If you're not identified with something, you're not triggered. But there's also, I think, like a little bit of a pushback. If you're not identified with anything, then you are also not kind of stimulated like in a positive way. Like the fact that I love my bear and blanket, uh, is like a source of like infinite charm to me. Like,
Yeah.
I just like imagine like their little days, what they go about doing, like when I'm not there in the bedroom with them. Like, how was your guys' day? They're just like, uh, if I didn't have that, and one day something bad will happen to them and I'll be crushed. And it's true that I wouldn't have been crushed if I never loved them the way that I do love them. But I guess
Sometimes
that's kind of
Buddhism,
like the bargaining.
sometimes I disagree with Buddhist philosophy because they do say that, like they do not attach and to that kind of stuff. But it seems like you lose out on some things when you don't attach. And normally I'm not attached, but right now
Wow.
being attached, like I really feel like there is something that I want to experience, the attachment and
Yep.
everything it has with it. But I feel like not attaching may be the safest option, but it is not the most uh good for my person or my own experience. I don't know, my identity maybe even.
Yes, so I'm agreeing and disagreeing with you. Yes, I think the teaching is not so much not attaching with anything. It's not selecting where you have attachment form. You either say yes to everything or you say no to everything. It's suffering begins when you say yes to something and say no to something.
I see.
Because when things you say yes to don't come your way, you're sad. Things you say no to come your way, you're sad or upset. So I think it's the picking. It's not so much attachment itself. It's more of a preference thing. Yep.
So I have some thoughts. I love
Okay.
this conversation. I'm glad that we're talking about this. So I would say yes, totally. And like in my kind of little guided meditation, which is not, I think, religious or something, but is we do talk about equanimity is the word that he uses, which is basically like not trying to push things away that we don't like and pull things towards us. Like that reactiveness is often like a source of harm for us. And you know, a lot of reasons. Like certain things we can't change. You know, it's like green eggs and ham. Like maybe the stuff we're pushing away, we actually do like, but we're wasting so much time and energy trying to push and pull. But I do think there's something, you know, like inherent to everybody. And again, I'm not saying it's stable, but it's stable at least in a moment. You know, we're dynamic, but there's a certain stability to us in this moment that there's certain things that are going to resonate with us more, you know, like just like every object in the world has like a pitch of resonance, right? You know, like they have this problem with bridges, is that bridges have a pitch of resonance, and if the wind is going just at the exact right speed, then it will the sympathetic vibrations of the bridge will increase and increase and increase until the bridge is shaking, right? And that's just true of everything. Like that's you know, how the opera singer can like break the glass, you know, is if you sing at that pitch strong enough, then the glass will vibrate strong enough and then shatter. And I think too, we all have pitches that we resonate with, you know, just naturally because we're in this physical world, and there are just certain things that will be more us just naturally, the same way that everything has a pitch, you know, physical pitch. And so certain activities are going to resonate more with us than other things. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that, while also acknowledging that, um, you know, there is harm in this pushing and pulling, and this sense of kind of like, you know, being too limited in the way that you delineate yourself and your preferences.
Yes, I think this goes back to what we have talked about before in one of my Zoom, that the whole thing about having control or having freedom is to be able to have a choice. So if you want to not be bothered by something, you have a choice to not be. But if you are okay with being bothered, then you also have a choice of not getting, not being upset by the fact that you are bothered. You just have that unconditional acceptance towards that emotion that arises, but you don't necessarily have to attach any meaning to it because it's an emotion. You experience it, you fully embrace it, and it will go away and you unclench rather than letting it seep into your subconscious and become part of the program that will in the future maybe affect your decision making. Yeah.
But I guess I agree with you there, but like this idea of fully feeling like whatever it is, the frustration, for instance, of the kitchen being rearranged, like there's often something in there about you. You know, there's something about your expectations, there's something about your preferences, there's something about your aesthetics, there's something. And so I think as part of fully feeling that emotion is to understand what about this triggered me, like where was the trigger, you know, and for what reason, what felt wrong to me in this particular, what offended my sensibilities, what offended my sense of self in this particular thing. sometimes it's like identity stowaways. I absolutely believe that people have identity stowaways. You know, people that have like over identified with the status quo, for instance, such that like, you know, something new comes along and they're like, what? We can't stop doing this. I feel like my mom's like this about like kind of like weird changes to the like Mormon policy or something. Like, no, we can't have the church like the main kind of church Sunday services. We can't have it go in this order instead. And I'm always like, why not? You know, is there like any weird thing? You know, like she really was shook up because of all these like pandemic changes to things where they started doing it. She was like, like could not handle it. But then when she got used to it, she was like, okay. But it's like interesting to me, you know, like people do kind of get identity stowaways. But I think again, like in order to understand that you have an identity stowaway, I think it's helpful to kind of drill down into, you know, why am I
Oh,
being
that,
triggered
yeah,
by this?
definitely. You have to always ask question after question after question. Yes, I definitely agree. And I see the benefit of having self-awareness and bringing all this to the foreground. I guess I'm just saying who you are at the core is not tied to all these pre-equipped preferences or like talents, I would say. Something that make you unique. Like,
Yeah.
yep, that's not what your values like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I agree. I often actually do. I think it's related. Interesting thought experiment. I love like kind of parallel universe stuff, or like what would have happened if this, you know, didn't happen or this did happen. I often think about like this kind of fictional character in my mind who was the best opera singer that's ever lived, except she was born in 500 BC in like Africa, and there was no opera at the time, and it's just like she wasn't, you know, but she could have been. Every part of her could have been if she had just been born, you know, like these circumstances of birth and you know, genetics and environment and everything else that affect us so much, like those they really can't be part of the core you. But I do think there are core parts of you, more core, at least there's certain things that are more core to you, like more, I think there are things that express more truth of you that aren't just 100% accidental, like relics of your genetics and your circumstances of your birth or whatever. What do you think, Victoria? Do you agree?
Yes. And
Okay.
can you think of what would be the core of you or of anyone, of
Yeah, so
everyone?
yeah, I don't know. One psychopath I met said we're all connected to stars. There's something about that that seems truthful to me. I mean, definitely that we're all energy, but I think like energy can be kind of different. You know, atoms, matter, it's like a little bit different. We have different properties. And so who knows what level, the quantum physics level or you know, the social level that we're expressing, but it does seem like there's something there that kind of is like characteristic of us, the genetic level. Do you have an idea though, Victoria?
I have two that I can think of right now. I think it's this is for everyone, that we have a hunger for joy
Mm.
and we have a hunger for variety. There probably are more, I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about joy. There's a Mormon scripture, man is that he might have joy. And Juliet Tango, let's get back to you. What do you think?
Um, I honestly am more confused about my identity than ever, but I feel like with identity, I feel like I feel like sometimes, and I think everyone does this, they don't have like dissociative identity disorder. You just sometimes you can also just will for another different identity to kind of step up and do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Like when you're moving, for instance, I always feel this way when I'm moving. Like I'm kind of not a very uptight person, or I'm not a very like high strung person. and I tend to procrastinate. But I feel like when I'm moving, like this other person comes over and they're more high strung and they get everything done. And then when I'm done, like I go back to me and that other thing just leaves. So I feel like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like you can kind of switch your identity as well. I mean, if you need
More
to.
like task oriented type of.
Yeah, like a very
Yep.
task oriented, a very conscientious person. I'm not a conscientious person, but I have the ability to be very conscientious when I'm house sitting, for instance, or, you know, doing stuff like that. But that's not who I am. But
Hmm.
that's an ability this other identity, I suppose, has
Yeah. Man,
that I
there
can
there are
use.
really good advantages to being like identity fluid.
Yeah, I think there are.
Do you miss those days, Pretty Morbid?
Hmm. I don't know. I'm actually getting to a point where I feel like I'm starting to see the other side, and the other side is like better. For a long time, I was in the in between where it was just like, why am I doing any of this? Let me just go back to the old way. But I don't know. I've connected with a lot of this in that I've become really interested and feel a lot of connection to like shamanism recently,
Hmm.
and have this sense of like being almost a channel for different spirits and different energies, and that partially being the nature of like my fluidity is something in my core sense is like of action. And so I have a strong connection to like, I guess, being in action. So it's almost like allow whatever feeling or energy or spirit needs to come in order to accomplish this action in a way. And so the idea of having like hyperdynamic personality or like hyperfluid personality, not attaching to anything and somehow embodying it, is feels really, I guess, natural to me. I don't know, there's this weird sense I have where I almost have like I guess I feel like I've often had a strange sense that my perspective seems eternal, but my emotional state feels non-existent. So, like in the past, whatever perspective I currently have is like being informed by whatever emotional state I'm in, but it takes on this sense of like this is how it's always been and how it always will be. And because of that, I can embody it like fully. But then when it's gone, it's just like, oh yeah, that didn't even exist. I didn't have any of those feelings or believe any of that. And now they're like, I don't know. I feel like I don't have a lot of good language for it, but they're like merging or flipping in a way where my perspective is maybe shifting as my emotion is like stabilizing.
Mm.
I'm not sure. I've just become really interested, I guess, recently in having a sense of identity being connected to like the notion of infinity and this like constant confusion of like matter versus energy and like time, different states of time all coexisting. Like the past isn't the past, the future isn't the future. They're all like coexisting simultaneously, almost like you're moving through the experience of it. Um, and and I guess I feel like I don't know, emotions, something about the experience of emotion seems to just be identity in like even the way like people have an emotion and they do things they never would have done before, or they felt like they had to act immediately, is like it becomes your entire being. And somehow like the ideal existence is to be able to unite and like move fluidly between a wide span of emotional states. And I feel like something about psychopathic nature is almost this like genetic survival tool for like whenever there are extreme states of like chaos throughout the world, and there are such emotional extremes and such like life or death uh flippancy, that something shuts down a lot of the intensity of that in order to move rapidly. Whereas I guess more like normie people or like chicken people, like their wires just get fucking blown. Um, and yeah, so I don't really know how to like tie all that together, but those are some of my thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, you mentioned something, and I want to ask Juliet Tango your reaction to that. But you reminded me something I wanted to say earlier to what you said, is like I often think about like this word disembodied, and like kind of when we were talking about emotions before and love, particularly in some of the experiences we felt around love, often that like that's a really good word to say for my emotions, is they felt disembodied, like they were like kind of like misty, ghost of an emotion or something, where it didn't really seem like they were like inside me, like in an embodied kind of way, like the full emotion or whatever. That reminds me of a beer commercial, full bodied Miller Lite. But kind of like, yeah, like a little bit like that. Yeah, something that's not full bodied or whatever.
Kind of
And Julie,
interesting too, that it's
go
like
ahead.
even you just mentioning beer just made me think of how they like refer to alcohol as spirits.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely get that sense of like that disembodied, like that's something I think about a lot recently over this past month, is like, where even is my energy at right now? Where is my, I guess I didn't realize it for so many years, but over the past couple of years I've had enough experiences of feeling like a huge like a sense of embodiment, of like being really in the body, or having like a deep like solid sense of being who I am, that now I have this sense of like, oh, I was just a ghost before.
Yeah. And Juliet Tango, is that kind of like, does that make you think of your ability to like tap into the you who's good at moving, or totally
I'm,
different?
no, no, it is kind of. I mean, I do feel like I have an identity. I don't feel like it was quite as nebulous as you all felt yours was, but I just don't feel like it's that important. Like I feel like it doesn't have to be that, and I'm not really attached to it. But like my preferences, I mean, I understand those because they're very hard and concrete. But like other things, like um, I don't know. I really don't. I mean, there's still some mystery to me with identity. It's hard for
Yeah.
me to really nail down what it is. Um, but I don't feel like I started out in a place where I it was mysterious. It still is mysterious. I don't know how to even describe it right now. It's it's a complicated for me. Maybe I just also don't see it. Like it could be I just don't see it, and so I can't. I don't know. Maybe I'm so far gone. I just can't even see it. But for me, I just feel like there's like a part of me that I know it's me, and it isn't anyone else. It's I have a core person, um, but I don't know if it's just my libertarian or my always been kind of independent, or I just don't feel like it matters. It matters. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm ever going to come to a place where I like have a strong sense of identity, because personally I don't think that's even good on
Uh-huh.
my own personal opinion. But also I don't know how. I mean, would I be triggered? Is that like, I mean, you're not looking for that identity, are you? You're not looking for that, to become that identified with something, that you're triggered by it. Like what is the identity that you're looking for? Because
Yeah.
um I'm perfectly happy the way I am.
Yeah. So I would say like my kind of response to this is that the one thing that I find that identity seems to be super helpful for, maybe even necessary for, is like having like a sense of meaning or purpose. And that the connection that I think is there, this is like my working theory, is that self-expression is somehow necessary to like this sense of fulfillment, meaning, purpose in life, like a satisfaction, like a life satisfaction. Like as you self-express and kind of like live the life that you think that you know, live in that moment, kind of like my niece, you know,
Yeah.
who's doing the kiddie pool. Like you're in that moment, you're doing the exact thing that you kind of feel like you were like born to do, but not in like this, like, you know, obviously she's just doing moving water from the kiddie pool.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like you saved 3 people from a burning building, but kind of just you feel like you're living like a, you know, kind of the quintessentially you know, in that moment, and that just feels like really, I guess grounded is the word, but like just feels like resonance is another word. But you know
Hmm.
how I experienced this a lot, I guess. Maybe you know, I did music, I did the law, you know, and I kind of had like a bunch of like separate interests that I was interested in. And anytime like those all kind of the stars aligned, and like I had one thing, like as a law professor, I did this because I wrote in like music copyright issues academically. And I was like, this is perfect because it's like touching upon all these things that are me, kind of thing. I wouldn't have described it that way then, but I think when you kind of feel like the stars align and like everything is like, oh, this is really kind of tapping into multiple, you know, not just one point of contact to me, but like multiple points of contact to whatever you are, that whatever you're doing is kind of engaging like multiple parts of you know, like that feels good, I guess. And that's my
Well,
experience. I wonder, is
I
that
feel
your
like I've always
experience?
had that. Yeah, I feel like I always have had that. Like I mean that I kind of would identify some of those things as preferences, like the,
Mhm.
you know, your interests and your talents and the things that you chose to become better at. And like I like cooking, you know, that's for me, it's something I like.
The
Obviously my
kitchen.
kitchen, yeah, the kitchen, god damn it. You know, things like that. I mean, I don't know. I what during the pandemic, I think COVID was one of the highlights of my life.
Love this
I
for
just
you.
yeah, I mean, I felt retired. I felt like I was retired. I felt like I was able to do all the things I wanted to do, and no work or no other people were in my way. So I feel like that was really me then. I really was able to just be me, and
Mhm.
I liked it. I had a lot of fun with it, and I was cooking. I made bath bombs. I went on lots of hikes. You know, I just did everything that I like to do. I watched my favorite movies. I drank a lot. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the me that was happy, that's me.
Yeah.
Is that the identity? Is that the identity I'm looking for, or that I'm confused about? Like, I don't. I feel like I can understand it, and I feel like it's there. I don't feel
Mhm.
like I really can verbalize it very
Yeah.
well. But I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? Like, it's who you
Yeah.
are, the core of who you are, your values, your, um, you know, the things you really that matter to you.
Yeah.
I have a question to both of you since we're talking about this. So the feeling that you are born to do this, or the feeling that everything is aligned, is the feeling that matters to you, or the activity? Like, for example, if one day you're no longer feeling this with music or law, but you are feeling it with something else, does that matter to you?
I would go do the other thing, you know,
So
if
it's
I
the
like,
feeling,
yeah.
it's not really that activity that you are attached to.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a guide, I think, for you to know what you're supposed to do if it feels good. I would imagine, at least that's what I would think. If you enjoy doing something, you want to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoy caring for my environment, I guess. Like not the earth, but like just not that I don't want to care for the earth, but I mean, like my house or my surroundings. I mean, I deep cleaned everything during the pandemic. I like everything was just clean in a way that I can't normally get it to be. I enjoyed organizing everything. So I don't know. To me, that was just something that I enjoyed. And I feel like that is a part of me. That's a part of who I am. It's a preference. And I felt happy doing it.
Yeah, but if what you care about is you felt happy doing that and the thing can change,
Yeah.
then how is it a part of who you are if it can change?
Well, I mean, that really isn't me. I mean, it's not, you'll never know who you are. I feel that's what I feel. You'll never really know who you
That's
are.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of the same thing with Buddhism. I feel like that's their teaching as well. Like you never really truly know who you are. Who are you really? Are you the the observer, or you're the one who's witnessing everything happen, but is it who are you? And I love listening. I sometimes listen to him when I go to sleep. Oh, I can't think of his name. Alan Watts. I don't know if you ever listened to any of his lectures. Some of them are set to like dubstep on YouTube, but it's really fun to listen to him and his lectures he gave, because he does talk a lot about like who are you and that kind of stuff. It's mystifying. I don't really think there's ever an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was saying the core you is someone that has the hunger for joy, because that's the feeling you're looking for. You're not necessarily attached to like your talent that you're born with. If it now switched from music to maybe math or sports, you still have joy, and that's what you look for, right? That's the core you. Not that you were a musician before and now you suddenly lost touch with music, that you're not you. You're still you. You're still that you that looks for that feeling.
Yes. And I should
That makes sense.
clarify, I was born with no talent for music. I was not born to it. I just happened to be born in a musical family. It was like forced on me. And then, eventually I adopted it, I guess. But that's an interesting thing too, because in music, I wouldn't necessarily say it is music even that is like the thing that engages me. It's like the way that I play music is the thing that engages me. And I play differently, like that. I have different strengths than any other musician, like a different recipe of strengths, like I like precision, I think, more. I don't care as much about self-expression. I care more about like just making the music sound as good as it can be. I'm not really a songwriter. There's like just a lot of things about it where it's like I engage with it in a way that nobody else does. I think about it like math. I don't
Yeah,
think most people think about it.
this is a form of self-expression though.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
It's all those choices, all
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, all those things that I choose to do in that moment. Like I choose to prioritize this over that. That is my self-expression. That's my value system manifesting itself in the world.
Emmy, do you want to take a moment to tell us where we can like find your music or like hear like a sample of what you do? Because I think I've had that question before when I've listened to these.
You know what? I will make a video and like post it to YouTube or something. I'll try to
Yeah,
do something like that. But yeah, I don't have like, yeah, I'll
you don't
try to
have an
do a video.
Instagram or something with your
It's
music.
mostly kind of, yeah, it's not like I'm not writing music. I'm just like playing music. I'm like playing in the cover band. I play like in the pit orchestras for musicals. Like I mostly just read and then try to like play in a couple orchestras or something. So I'll try to record something, but it's mostly just like the thing that I add to music, maybe you couldn't even hear it, is like in that moment I just try to be like the foundation. I love that role to just be like, here's like the canvas. Go ahead and paint on me. I set up that foundation that everybody else can like play on top of and kind of do whatever their thing is. But without that foundation, you can't have the rest of it. But it's interesting that I love that. I love that role. I love to play a rhythm section instrument. But let's keep going on some of these list things that we came up with. So we talked a little bit about love, gender, sexuality. Does anybody else? Juliet Tango talked about gender and sexuality. Victoria or Pretty Morbid, do you guys have comments?
I'm the same way, so that's all I can say. I wouldn't even say bisexual, maybe pansexual or asexual even.
Yeah, asexual
Anything
even.
goes.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I didn't really have like a I just also kind of recall like in my youth being like confused and also like frustrated on why people would fixate on certain genders or like labels for sexuality, and like taking interest in it, like it did provide a source of obsession, but at the same time I always had the sense of like wherever I feel it, that's where I'm gonna go. And I had a sense too of like, well, if it's only women that are making this feeling, but then it suddenly just switched to men, well, I'm obviously I'm not just gonna keep sleeping with women because that's what I was doing before. Like what, go where the feeling is.
Just like Victoria said, you gotta go where the feeling is. So, what about social faux pas is one that Juliet Tango brought up, and maybe it's best for you to introduce this idea.
Okay. The example I gave you, but it happens, there's many ways it can happen. So it's just like something that you might do that you wouldn't think twice about, but other people would be offended or think was rude, even because you don't care maybe about these particular things, so it would never appear, you would never notice it. But like I gave the example of I was in the airport with my friend and another friend of ours that we were traveling to Morocco, and I had pre-check and they didn't. And so I said, well, you know, a long time ago in the past, they used to offer pre-check to everyone in your party. So maybe they still do that because it's been a long time since I'd flown with a group of people. And so I went and asked the TSA person, um, do my travel companions get pre-check as well since they're on the same flight as I am? And she said no. So I turned around briefly and I didn't see them. And so I just went on to pre-check and they were, I guess, standing behind a pylon waiting for me. And I just left them there. And they thought I was going to supper with them in the regular line. And I was off having a drink and they were offended. But so things like that, maybe things that might be a little cold, I guess, that people might think are cold, not having maybe some soft skills that other people, you know, you wouldn't be bothered by it. So why would you think anyone else would be bothered by it? So that kind of thing, I guess, those kind of things are what I'm trying to mean by faux pas.
Do you guys have? I have a story. It's actually of my niece, a different niece. Because I think it kind of captures like this attitude. Like when she was maybe like 6, 7, 8 or something. Her parents were working with her about like accepting a compliment more like graciously. So you'd say something like, "Hey, you did so well in your piano recital," or whatever. And she'd be like, "I know." And then her dad would be like, "Compliment." And then she'd stop and be like, "Thank you for the compliment." So it's like this total like Pavlovian kind of training of like trying to, but it is like this funny kind of superficial thing, but also I could see why they had to work with her on it is people could be like totally put off, by somebody being like, "I know."
I think I have
Victoria?
a recent experience about this. So I am a scientist, right? So, and I am recently promoted to like the upper
Congratulations.
whatever. And so I am the youngest. I'm in my 30s, and then everyone else in like the upper management or whatever you call senior scientist team. Everyone there were they are like in their 50s. So I'm like the most junior one. But when we're at work, I don't try to be respectful. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I feel like it's stupid, like all this social game, like just because you have seniority, that what you say when I disagree with, I'm gonna just, bite my tongue. No, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't even try to be very polite about it. I would just get to the point. And I can see that some of them are a little bit put off. But it didn't bother me because I don't want to waste time and think about how to best say it. I'll just say it. And we probably will need to sit down at some point and hash things out and say, look, it's not me being disrespectful or anything. So I guess that's one of the thing that you were describing. Does that sound like this is what you're getting at?
Yeah.
I have an issue with like the social faux pas of like, I guess, goodbyes. That one, like, I just the other night I was like leaving after a gig and like, yeah, I just don't, I go through the motions of saying goodbye, but it kind of just feels like it's always been because I've been taught to, and people have like grilled me on the fact that I just won't. And
This is also something that well, after you're done, I'd like to share mine as well
oh
about
yes,
goodbye.
yes. And it's like I I don't know, when I try to do it, it doesn't really seem like how everyone else does it. Like, it seems like everyone is having this experience being together somewhere, and then it's coming to an end, and then the goodbye is wrapping it up. But it seems like, I mean, kind of going back to my analogy with being like a spirit, like I kind of was just there, looming. um and then I just, then I just disappear, like I just poof. And it's like awkward for me to kind of like, yeah, go from person to person, so it just seems like I should just leave.
I don't understand goodbye.
Yeah, I think this is something that a lot of us don't understand. This is really a thing because on the trip to Morocco again, it's also a cultural difference, but kind of being a psychopath is kind of a cultural difference from normal people, I feel like.
Such a
So
good way to put it.
yeah, uh, I just feel like saying goodbye, it's for me, it's good night. So the Moroccan who we were visiting, um, we were at a table and there was a homeless person who was begging for money from the American tourists. And the entire time we were at dinner, he didn't give him any money.
But the
But then,
American tourist with the Jewish guy sitting
yeah,
next to them.
yeah, exactly. The temporary Muslim as well. So it's just so bizarre to me. But at the end of the dinner, he ended up giving him money, and I was like, "Why didn't you do that at the beginning? So we would have left us alone." And I do the shame finger thing, like shame, rubbing your fingers together. And I said like, shame on you. I was just like joking, I wasn't being really serious. But then I turned around, I turned my back to him, and I walked to my room and I went to bed. I was just joking. I mean, I didn't feel anything bad, but he was so offended by that. It really bothered him. He couldn't sleep. And
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, I never meant, I was joking, first of all, about you. The only reason why I was joking is because if you were going to pay him at the end of the dinner after he'd been begging us this whole time, you should have paid him in the beginning so he just move on and leave us alone. So anyway, there's that. And
Mhm.
then the turning your back, I guess, is a more of a I don't know, kind of a thing to them. I would
Oh.
never have thought about that as being a faux pas, but I turned around and I just walked back to the room and went to sleep, and I didn't say goodnight, and that's like a thing, I guess. I never really say goodnight. I just go to bed.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but if it makes sense socially to say goodnight, but it's not something I normally do. And saying goodbye, I guess I guess I say goodbye socially. I've been trained to do that, but maybe saying goodbye and goodnight are something that we don't really do as
Oh.
psychopaths as much, or
Yeah,
psycho adjacent, whatever I am.
my girlfriend same way. She's always the Irish goodbye. Are you guys familiar with that phrase?
Oh
Does
yeah,
it involve
yeah.
beer?
Yeah, which is to not say goodbye. It's just to leave.
Oh
Yeah,
yes, okay.
yeah, she's all about that. But then she's like gets on me sometimes if I don't say goodnight, like in a phone conversation, like if she has to be at work later or something, she's like, "You didn't say goodnight." I'm like, "Okay, Irish goodbye." Iconic. One that I do kind of a faux pas, but I've been trained out of it now by a friend who was like, I can't believe you do this. Like, it's so disrespectful. Is that I would put like money, I just put money like on the counter or whatever of whatever place where like, here's a 20, and then like not throw it, but not gently set it either. Like, I'm just kind of like, here's a 20 or whatever, that type of motion. And she was like, that's so disrespectful, like, it's basically saying like I'm dismissing you and I'm not even going to, here's the money because like almost like I'm commodifying the transaction. I'm like, I am commodifying it. Like I'm really just paying for this Gatorade or whatever and just throwing them the money. We're not friends. I'm not friends with the person who's like taking my money or something. But then she taught me, especially like we did a trip in Asia, and she's like, I will not continue traveling with you if you keep doing this. So I was like, okay, let me learn how to do this. And so I ask her like specifically, like, what is step by step? What are the things I can do? And now I do it exactly the same, even outside of Asia. Is I take the money gently out of wherever I'm getting it, and then I hold it like gently in both hands and like offer it to them like this.
Oh my goodness.
And they receive it like they're receiving like the sacrament of Christ or whatever. They're like, yes, thank you. And that's how we do it. But I have a friend who kind of older friend, probably autism spectrum disorder. He does the same thing. He throws money or whatever. And it never bothers me, but some of the people, like our friend group or whatever, have privately complained to me, and I'm like, but he's so old. He's not gonna learn.
I
Probably
personally
not.
would never be offended by someone throwing money at me.
Me neither. Me neither. That's the problem, is because we wouldn't be bothered by this. We wouldn't be bothered if somebody didn't say goodbye or something. And so it's like, fine.
Exactly. And when someone disagree with my science, I want them to just get to the point and tell it to my face. Don't try to
Exactly.
be polite about it.
Because if they're polite about it, then that suggests that you have a weak ego. They think that you have an ego that's so weak that they have to, like, kid glove, like be very gentle, like, oh, we can't tell Victoria that she's wrong. We have to kind of be like, hey, So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
different value system.
it's kind of like, I don't know if it's their ego. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like you handing the money to those people is kind of like the way that they want Victoria to approach them, kind of like you didn't bow to us sufficiently before you made that comment. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Any other faux pas? We have more stuff on our list, but
That's all I can think of.
okay. So I wrote down something about, like, is there anything, do people have good stories about where other people have found them, like either faux pas or other wise, to be like repellent or revolting, repulsive? Like you're like, oh, definitely like the cat's out of the bag this time. They know something's up with me. They're like disgusted by something that I've done. Keep thinking about that one. We talked about crushes already. And we talked a little bit about the state of being normal is glassy calm. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that,
Oh,
Juliet
yeah.
Tango, or
This kind of goes over what we already kind of said earlier, I feel like, about just kind of like kind of Buddhism, I guess, a little, just or like being mindful or kind of or being in that calm place. But I kind of feel like that's kind of like where I normally am. And in my normal life, I feel like I would describe it as kind of like my internal state as being like a placid lake or like a glassy or like glass or something. Like it's kind of inert and it's non-reactive. It's just like flat kind of and shiny and just there. But like with my emotions and stuff like that recently, like it's been more like a tempest or like a storm or something. Doesn't feel the normal, like I don't feel that normal calm inside.
because of
Like
your crush?
well, because of my attachment. Yeah. I don't think
Your
I've ever really
attachment.
actually had. I've never even had a crush, as far as I know. Uh, I mean, I don't really get infatuated with people, but I guess I am infatuated. I guess it's not something that just kind of like it's not something like little or light. It's like something that like over time develops. So it's not like I saw them and was like, oh, I'm in love, which I think is stupid. That expression
Agree, it's
even.
stupid. In fact, can we
Yeah,
pause here and talk about how, like, the people who are like, oh, like in love is stupid? I just talked to this
yeah,
guy, this British guy, about this, and he's like, do you fall in love? And I was like, well, probably don't, like the way that you do. And then I was like, can you kind of describe it or something? And then I was like, no, definitely don't. So I was like, so you're just like 100%, like obsessed with a person you've met for like 24 hours and then it dies off.
yeah.
Like,
So stupid.
it's so stupid to me. And he was like, well, how could you be a musician if you've never been in love? I was like, okay. I don't know. I don't even know how to address that.
I don't know. For me, I feel like when people say fall in love, it just is so kiddie and stupid. I it's not, I mean, I feel an attachment. Like, I mean, you can imagine what an attachment to someone else is like, maybe. I mean, like if you have a family member that you care deeply for, or like your caregiver as a child, whoever that was, like, I
Your
mean, you
barren
have like
blanket. Yeah.
your barren blanket, like those kind of things, you have like this deep connection, it feels like to them. Or like, I don't know, it just to me the to say fall in love or to have like what really makes me feel gross is when someone's been dating someone and they're posting all these wonderful photos and they're with them and then they break up and then like 2 weeks later they're with someone else and they're like supposedly in the same like happy state that they were in like just with this other person for like a year and it's like how did you just do that, like did that other person mean anything to you at all, like that you just I don't know, like I mean for me I don't understand that, like quick crushes and the I don't know if it's just a me thing or a psychopath thing, but the quick crushes I don't get. I don't never had a quick crush on anyone. And these the only time I do feel deeply is like every 10 years, apparently. So it's just like it's just not something that comes very often. But it does feel more deep than something that I couldn't replace in like 2 weeks. I don't think I could like go out and be like, oh, I'm happy with this person now, the same way I was with the other person. Like that's not how it works for me. I don't know if that's normal or not, but that's just the way it is for me.
Yeah, for me, I just thought of this. I've never had cancer treatment, but for me, I imagine it's like what cancer treatment would feel like, just week after week of just like horrifying feelings that I can't like have like no real expression for, nor do they have like any sense to them. They're just like coming out of left field, and I'm just like, wow, okay, this is terrible, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a baddie. You maybe should be glad that it's only 10 years, every 10 years. But
Well,
I
but
actually
it lasts so long. I don't know if I'm just feeling like the regular amount of normal stuff because I know people like kill themselves over this stuff, like or someone dumps them and they commit suicide or that kind of stuff. People take it really personally and
real quick
uh
pause. The normal people listening to this are probably what? We're like, yeah, people kill themselves over this. They're like, these people do not understand what's happening.
well, listen, just turn on the radio one day. Every fucking song is a love song.
Yeah.
It's about some kind of a love, requited, unrequited. It's always about something. Every country song is about love in a Chevy or something. So it just there. Obviously, this strikes a chord with everyone who, including myself, I suppose now, but like not normally. Normally, I listen to it. I don't really read into that. But then after I kind of have emotions, I'm like, oh my God, like every song is talking to me. Like they have written this because they had this feeling that I never have. So I just feel like it is kind of a universal thing, and maybe I'm living like the life of a teenager right now. Like maybe I'm at that level
Mm,
of like emotional development.
yeah. Like puppy
But I
love or
know that
something.
I don't think it's puppy love. I really don't. I don't think I have that. I don't think I
That's
have
not
puppy
what
love.
teenagers say too. They say the same thing. It's not
Oh,
puppy love.
really?
Yeah, it's
They
forever.
do?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Well,
That's what I've learned from movies.
it lasts for years. It doesn't go away quickly. It doesn't come on quickly. It's not like it's not something that I don't care about because I really do care about it. But it's like, for me right now, this is just a portal for me to like access myself in a way that I can't normally do. So that's what it is mostly for me, like to be able to like access part of me that I can't normally get to. And that's why it's so important to me. But um yeah, I don't know if other people have this. I really can't say if I'm experiencing what normal people experience or if it's so much more or so much less. I really don't know. But I don't know. You all have, how do you feel? Do you ever have like an attachment or fall in love or whatever? And if so, like, to me, the way it affected me is like I could just uh, burst into tears for no reason. Uh, I would be like at a guard shack or in a grocery store, and I could just think of something, and it would just start happening, and that's not something that has ever happened. So not it's not comfortable. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's not for me,
Yeah.
and
See,
it
I
doesn't
had
feel like
this.
me. Mhm.
It doesn't feel like you. Yeah, I had those two kind of like, I'll call them your word, attachments, like during therapy, that were like, one was so intense, like I really felt sick the whole time. And then luckily, like my very next kind of like relationship or whatever, I don't know if this was just like a gift, kind of like, hey, you put up with all those terrible feelings for so long, so the next time it's going to be super easy. Just like the first time that I like kissed my current girlfriend, I was like, oh, we're soul bonded. And then it was like so easy, like like we were always kind of on that same page, mostly about being soul bonded. And then it like, so I never had like the terrible feelings, just the terrible feelings of missing her, I guess, when we weren't together. Hopefully
Yeah,
that
that makes
happens to
sense.
you.
Well,
I mean,
maybe.
hopefully this turns into something. Maybe it will. Even though I wonder. Well, so this is interesting. Did you say you said that it doesn't feel like, does it feel like it's part of you, or does it feel like the feeling kind of came from this irrational place? Like, does it feel like it's
Well,
coming from you?
there's many ways of looking at it, but like the part that I mostly focus on is that it's a pathway to me to gain access to a part of myself I don't normally have access to.
Yeah.
So for me, that's important. But I would say it feels just like you described about the like I'm experiencing the emotions, like they came and enveloped me, and I'm in them, and I just have to kind of like I have to like focus on just experiencing them, and then like waiting for them to dissipate, and then dealing with them coming back and going away. And it's just like, it is so much. It is too
Yeah.
much. And it's not who I am. Like the normal glassy self that I am,
Yeah.
like that is not who I am. Not, it's absolutely not who I am.
So this is like a little bit related to, I think, pretty much our final topic, unless people have, like, we did say something of too about chastise and gray rage. We could talk maybe a little bit more about that if people want to. But your last topic you wanted to talk about was intuition. Like,
Oh
what does
yeah.
intuition say about this to you, Juliet Tango? Or what are your thoughts about intuition?
Well, intuition is a difficult topic for me too, because I think we kind of mean the same thing, but there's kind of a spiritual component or something mystifying about it. Like when I was a child, I would have these intuitive moments where I would, it literally just seemed like a spiritual moment because I'm not really spiritual, but, or not like religious, I guess. But like I would have a thought. It's kind of like an unspoken voice, I guess. Or if I was religious, I would think it was maybe God that was speaking to me or something. But it's like something that is like communicated to me, not really with words or pictures, but just like kind of a knowing. And so, like as a child, I would have these all the time, and it would be like the firebell is going to go off, and then the firebell would go off, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's really weird. I wonder why I knew that." Or like I'd feel like one time I was in a Sabbath school or like a church school because my parents are religious, and I just knew that the strings on the guitar were going to break, and then like just like 10 seconds later, the strings on the guitar broke, and I was like, "How did I know that? Like that's such a weird thing." But then I also kind of have these feelings in normal life, and they just kind of will like they don't really. It's not really a thing I can really communicate with, but it's one way communication just to myself. Like it'll just communicate with me, don't don't do something. And sometimes initially I would kind of uh, contradict the voice or like be like, well, why not? Why would I have that thought of not to step there? Or, and then I would step there and I'd get hurt. So I just listen to it now mostly. I mean, I try to listen to it. I don't know if that's kind of what you feel. I think you kind of like talk to your, like, you can kind of like make decisions with your intuition. Mine just like offers advice. I feel like it's like things that are percolating in my subconscious that kind of come to my awareness before I even am able to know how, like, was it a sound or sight or, some sense picked up on something and then it just is communicated to me kind of, and without me really consciously knowing how. But then I tend to listen to it because I've had so many bad experiences when I defied it.
Yeah. I mean, I do talk to my intuition, but I think of it mostly as just kind of directing my attention to like a particular question. Like, I started doing it a lot with regard to food that I'm eating because I have like a tendency to get sick from the foods that I eat. Uh and it's kind of random. Like the only thing that doesn't make me sick is Chick-fil-A, which may explain my ever dying fondness for Chick-fil-A. Like Chick-fil-A's never made me sick, and then other foods can, and it. So I'll ask intuition, like, is this okay to eat the yogurt? Is it okay to eat the sandwich? So I think it's just kind of like taking a moment and being like, whatever it is, like just directing my
Your gut
inquiry, I
feeling.
guess, my focus, yeah, to try to be like, what is my gut feeling right now about this? Where I've had that similar experiences to you, especially before. Like I've only started asking intuition questions for the past like 5 years or something. But before it was the same thing. It would be like, do not answer the phone, and it's like some total bum situation or something that I wouldn't want to be part of or whatever. They leave a voicemail and I'm like, whoa, good thing I good thing I didn't answer the
Yeah.
phone or whatever. but that's how it used to be. And then I guess I've just kind of like gotten a little bit better, even in meditation, about shifting my attention, like being more volitional about shifting my attention, more kind of aware of it and kind of trying to control it. Whereas before, I'd just allow my attention to settle basically on like whatever it would. I'd clamp down and be like, okay, we have to write this term paper or something. But for the most part, just kind of like allowing it to go wherever. And I feel like I've tried to that when I'm asking intuition questions, it mostly is just trying to direct like all my resources, my mental resources, my subconscious, if it's possible, all to this little question real quick. Like before we keep kind of going about our merry way, let's just real quick decide what we can eat for lunch. Victoria, Pretty Morbid, do you guys have some ideas?
I've been trying to tap into my intuition more over the past few months through meditation, and I've um I've definitely found that like I seem to experience it, at least so far, as kind of like, I guess maybe that gut feeling, or like kind of like I almost feel it like in my muscles. Like I'll be doing stuff at work, like I work at like a deli, so I'll be like prepping like meats and stuff, and there's just a sense of like I know how many slices will be what weight. Like there, and at first I would like question it all the time, or I would try to memorize, like I just would like force memorization like I did when I was younger. But now I'm trying to just like let it go and let my intuition tell me what task I should do next, or when to stop something. Um, I've also like stopped trying to like memorize the numbers of certain like product codes and stuff, and just like let it come to me. And it's like, yeah, it's odd. I've gone through this period where I've had these like, I don't know, exercises where I will like micro fixate on little details around the house to like see, to just notice how it affects my feeling. So if like I'll watch like a show, I'll like spend all this time adjusting the fan to like the perfect speed, or the lights, or like the volume of everything, or like where do I want certain blankets. And like I don't just like, because in the past it was just like, okay, you're uncomfortable, I don't want to deal with it, don't care, just ignore that, move on. Sort of like, I feel like kind of like what you talked about maybe with like food or something, like you just, whatever your body's telling you, you just like, I have other things going on, so I'm going to do that instead. And I even went through a period a couple months ago where I was like, uh I was getting so like worked up over whether I should like change the song on the radio, because yeah, it was just like too easy to like not give a shit. And I've gotten to a point where I feel like I was missing out on experiencing something fully.
Hmm.
So I would like go back and forth to like try to really settle with like, where are my emotions being called, or where am I feeling? And yeah, I do have the sense that like more powerful intuitions are kind of arising in me, but they are intense, kind of like what Juliet Tango said, where it's like, why did I know the fire alarm was going to go off, or the strings were going to break? Like, there's at some point where you know things that it disturbs me that I know them. It's so jarring from any sense of rationality, and even I think agency. And so slowly, as I'm kind of coming to terms with the discomfort of that and working through it, it's becoming more available to me, and not just freaking me out so much.
What do you mean, even agency?
I guess like it's weird to have a feeling or a sense of what to do, whether it's avoiding something bad happening, or even doing something good that you don't feel like you did. Um, and then I guess that kind of leaves me in the sense of like, well, what is the feeling of doing something, of what I did? Where's that sense of possession or like direction coming from? Um, but yeah, so it's kind of odd to have like my intuition just be like, I don't know, stop watching the show, go outside right now. And then I go outside, and there's just like this like beautiful sunset, and for whatever reason like a fox has just like come out of the woods and is like right there, and then there's a deer on the other side, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is such this absurd but amazing situation, and there's no sensory reason that I should have known this was going to happen, and now I'm really enjoying it. But it's also like, well, who the hell just brought this into my life? I don't like that. I wanted to control things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of want to question her, like, why, why should I go outside? Or at least for me, like
I
that's
feel
how I
the
was
same way.
initially.
Yeah. I think a lot of my life has been like very obsessively questioning things. And I do think, and that's something about that is natural to me. Like, sort of obsessive curiosity seems to have been present since I was a really small child. Like, I need to know things. I need to understand them. I want to. And maybe it's like, and other people just seem to be really bothered by that. I mean, there's kind of like that classic scene you see come up in so many movies or TV shows where it's like, why are you asking so many questions? Like, when you ask a lot of questions, people just get like, it bothers them. Like, I guess they can just go to the flow with situations, or they're more comfortable just taking those signs. Like, oh, I had a feeling, and then I went outside and there was this lovely, wildlife or whatever. And something in me just needs to ask more, understand more. And that, I mean, that kind of even reminds me of like, Emmy, you mentioning earlier, like any situations where people have been kind of like repulsed by you or shocked by you. I mean, that sense of like obsessively wanting to ask more questions, or like even debate like the foundation of an emotion, why anyone would even have an emotion at all, seemed to be like so like offensive to the fact that they had that emotion. And yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I have like a similar personality trait, identity trait maybe. Question mark. But I feel like I've always wanted to know things, and like what intuition has been like a huge blessing to me, because it was tricky. I could understand that people, like, I recognized that other people did not want me to keep asking, but I had these questions. I really wanted to know, and some of these things I knew, especially as an adult, not as a child. I would ask, always get in trouble for asking questions. Like personal questions, like, oh, about people's sex lives or whatever. But I just had like, I just wanted to understand. I had like this like need to understand, it felt like. And now I just ask intuition these questions, and it feels totally satisfying, and I feel like I'm not a burden on other people. Here and there, intuition doesn't answer some of my questions. And I'll ask intuition, is this an okay question to ask? And intuition will sometimes be like, no. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, like maybe this invades somebody's privacy too much. Or maybe, for whatever reason, that there's that this is not a good thing for me to know. And then it's even having that is helps me to just kind of like let go of it. Because I think, and my therapist, who is deceased, diagnosed me, like personality disorder, otherwise unspecified. I was diagnosed as a psychopath earlier, but then like most recently with the therapist, he's like, okay, yeah, it's this, but like the psychopathy, but you also have some obsessive compulsive personality disorder traits. And I think some of that he was picking up on was kind of this need to know, and this need to kind of like understand things. And it maybe did kind of seem compulsive, to a large extent. But intuition has really helped me to kind of like loosen even the appearance or the feel of a compulsion about it. Like I still feel like I have a great joy in knowing and learning all these different things. I love to find out, love to know, but I don't feel, I just feel like intuition helps me to understand enough that I feel like just that joy, and never kind of that constant like yearning or needing to pull or push that Victoria talked about earlier. Any thoughts, Victoria, on intuition?
Not really.
Okay. That's pretty good. Well, we've been chatting for like a while. Does anybody have any like closing thoughts that you want to bring up? This has been fun. I'm glad you had this idea, Juliet Tango.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. I wouldn't mind doing it in the future when we have more questions. But snuff films.
Oh yeah, snuff films. We've never gotten to snuff films.
I don't know if that's the appropriate term for it, but I just feel like death is very hidden from our culture in America at least. And I know it's not like that everywhere, but it's something that we put makeup on and we aren't even allowed to really see it. And it's just interesting to watch. I don't know if you've ever gone on, if you're bored at work or something and just end up scrolling the interwebs, it can go to a dark place. And I find it very fascinating to watch them. I don't really have a lot of sympathy generally, and so I don't really feel super disturbed or like emotional about it, but I feel very intrigued. Like, and there are people who are doing these awful things that are obviously so far removed from it that they don't feel bad when they're doing it. So I don't feel like I'm a monster for watching it, although I'm explaining right now. But I feel like it's something that actually isn't so unusual. I feel like a lot of people would do it if they knew it existed, or if they um if they come across it, I think they would be interested to see it. My friend actually uh also admitted that he also has watched these things, and I think it's something maybe people do and they just don't talk about it. And maybe it's more of a niche thing, and it's not like I do it all the time, but sometimes I just do it because I'm so curious, or I'm just so bored. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna watch people getting their heads cut off, or you know stuff like that. I don't know if that's something that you do, but it's just so interesting. I mean, when are you ever going to see someone getting beheaded? Or the first debit card purchase I ever made was a set of Turkish tea glasses. And the second thing I ever purchased when I was young was it was a VHS, I think. I'm not sure if it's DVD or VHS, but anyway, it was one of those. And it was called The Faces of Death.
Oh.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it or seen it, but it's just like a video. It's actually really well done documentary of just the way people die in different cultures. And in Mexico, or not Mexico, in Spain, they're getting flayed by the bull, and then they follow them to the morgue, or that kind of thing. In different cultures, they burn them, and everyone like visits the body first, and that kind of stuff. Some cultures they eat them, they eat the ashes. It's just unique and interesting, and I don't know why it bothers people, but it's fascinating to me. And so I feel like that's why I watch it. But anyway, I don't know if that's what you meant by snuff films exactly. I think there was something else more sexual. I don't have a sexual feeling about it, but just a curiosity.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I haven't watched snuff films, but here is, if you're on Instagram, I suggest Medicalpedia. So the
Oh
word
my God.
medical and yeah, pedia, yeah, that one is so fascinating to me because I also feel like a similar, maybe it comes from my need to know or whatever, but I do not shy away from stuff like that. I want to know what injuries can be repaired and what can't. I want to know because it informs even some of my life decisions. It's going to inform if I ever happened upon this type of injury, what to do, what not to do. I just think it's kind of interesting, and I agree with you that there's like, for something that people have such strong feelings about, there's a lot of differences culturally. Like, we don't treat death one way, but within our culture, if you step outside the bounds of the way you're supposed to treat death, then yeah, you're a monster.
Yeah.
It is like a huge taboo. And it's interesting. I've been watching the TV show Yellow Jackets. Spoiler alert, there are deaths involved. And it's just really interesting to see the way the taboos come up, in the TV show about oh, you did this, sicko, but it's totally okay to do this other thing where you're like, oh, okay, I guess so.
And what about the others? Do you have anything like that you've done?
I have something like publicly on display at my home that I think I've shared on Discord before. I have like a series, like a panel of photos that I hang on the wall at my work desk at home that is right across my bed. And the series of photos are the dead body scenes from Hannibal, the
Oh,
series.
I love
Yeah.
Hannibal.
Yeah, the series Hannibal. And
Hmm.
sometimes when people visit, they will be so shocked.
Beautiful. Oh,
They'll be like, this is the thing you look at when you go to sleep and wake up. And like a panel of it. And it's not even real. And like, yeah, it's not
no,
even
but they're very
real.
artful. They're very, I don't know what they call them, a tableau or something. They're very artful the way they did them.
Yes, especially that episode where that murderer grow fungi out of
Yeah.
corpses. When I saw that scene, I had tears because it was just so beautiful.
They're symbolic as well.
I love this. uh, Pretty Morbid, do you have any thoughts? You good?
Yeah, I'm pretty much good.
All right. Everybody else, any other comments? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for your openness, your honesties, your willingness to share with the broader world, to shine light on a lot of topics that people shy away from. Appreciate you guys, and we'll have you all on very soon. Chat you
Okay,
later.
don't say goodbye.